So just how did this hobby begin? Now, I think most of you would probably agree that the hobby, the miniature painting hobby, has grown rather a lot in recent years. I myself started out in either the late 80s or very early 90s, around the time of the release of the Space Crusade board game. Space Crusade and its fantasy counterpart Hero Quest, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, was a popular gateway board game into the world of hobbying and fantasy. I'm Sean Connery now, was a gateway into the world of science fiction and fantasy miniature collecting and painting and gaming. Now, when I first got into the hobby around then, it was popular, but not overly popular. It was still very niche. Only a few of us, I would say cool kids at school, but we were certainly not cool. Only a few of us were into the hobby at the time. It was kind of the sort of thing that you might get beaten up for mentioning at school. Now, we never got beaten up, but a few people did try to ridicule us. Luckily, everything has moved on now and everyone's a little bit more inclusive, and the whole of the hobby seems much more accepted in the culture of today. I would even go so far as to say it's one of the cooler hobbies to have. It's not the sort of thing you need to hide anymore. Now, the hobby itself, I think, was birthed in the late 60s or early 70s. So let's jump in and find out a little bit more about the emergence of the hobby. The birth of the miniature painting hobby. Likes! Metal Wargames miniatures first began to appear in the late 1960s. They were thought of simply as gaming pieces and often went unpainted. For those who could be bothered, basic paint jobs with flat colours were the norm. Painters who wanted to produce detailed models using light and shade vented their artistic obsessions on much larger scale military figures. Two things were happening to change this. Firstly, the quality of 25mm models appearing on the market was improving dramatically. Secondly, a number of people were using oil paints to paint 54mm Napoleonic figures, matching them closely to 19th century romantic battle paintings. Two such pieces of miniature art immediately spring to mind. A diorama, which brought to life the painting of the Battle of Borodino by Louis-François Lejeune, and a plastic Hysterex kit converted to look just like Jerry Cole's Chasseur officer. Both of these made a big impression on many hobbyists of the time, including John Blanche himself. With the advent of super detailed 25mm models, hobbyists began to find painting 54mm miniatures less rewarding. Rank upon rank of painted models have a completely different appeal to single figures, and so hobbyists became interested in painting regiments or even whole armies. Around this time, a lot of people were becoming fascinated by the fantasy genre, inspired particularly by Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. There appeared a new breed of miniature painter who had a single aim: to produce brilliant fantasy miniatures for tabletop battles and roleplay adventures. The foundations for fantasy figure painting were established. Advanced techniques were pioneered and developed by fantasy enthusiasts, often later followed by their historical brethren. Now, when it comes to the hobby, you probably have a paint palette for use when painting your miniatures. But if you have one of these plastic round ones here with the little indentations on the bottom, you will notice if you flip it over on the back here, there's a little inscription don't know if you can make this out, which reads, if you're enjoying this video then please like it and consider subscribing to the channel. That means you, Olivia. If you are enjoying the content on this channel then please consider joining the Patreon, the link to which is in the description below or up here. By the late 1970s, Citadel Miniatures was established and gave the public exactly what they had always longed for: a vast range of superbly detailed miniatures, perfect for painting in the greatest of detail. With the continuing upsurge in interest and talent, Citadel Miniatures grew beyond its cult hobby beginnings and the Games Workshop Design Studio was founded. Professional figure painters were employed and new techniques developed. People such as Dave Andrews and Colin Dixon quickly established very high standards of painting to which miniatures fans could aspire. Today, with Citadel Miniatures, we have the most amazing range of fantasy models imaginable. We have White Dwarf magazine with its long-running heavy metal painting guides. They have an army of highly talented individuals painting Citadel miniatures to staggering standards. And we also have the Golden Demon Awards. The standards of the entries have reached a level that people could only dream of when it was first introduced. If they continue to develop at this rate, the next few years are going to be very exciting indeed. One thing's for sure, whatever happens, Citadel Miniatures and the Golden Demon Awards are always going to be leading the way. So, the birth of the hobby. What did you think of that? When did you enter the hobby, and why? Why did you join the hobby? The hobbied? The hobbits. Why did you join the hobbits on their ride to Mordor? Why did you join the hobby? Who got you into the hobby? When you joined the hobby, did you notice much growth? Would you expect to see more growth of the hobby, or would you expect to see a decline over the next few years? Will you continue on with the hobby over the years? I have to say that I've quit many times over the years and I've always got back into it. I don't think you ever truly leave. Now, I'm pretty sure over the last couple of years the hobby had a massive explosion due to some sort of strange virus that did the rounds that I'm not going to mention because the algorithms don't seem to like talking about it. But a lot of people ended up being at home and needed a new hobby, thus they found this one. It does seem to have sort of plateaued a little now, and that's a word I don't think I've ever used before. But I'm always hoping there's going to be something else popping up that gets more people into the hobby. I do love seeing it grow and more of the masses coming over to join us in our geekiness. If you want to see some more Oldhammer videos, and I know you do, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. As always, thank you very much for watching, and always remember to drill your barrels.